The August heat in Dripping Springs, Texas, pressed down on everything like a hand that refused to let go. By 4 in the afternoon, the thermometer outside Hank's Feed and Supply read 104 degrees, and the asphalt on Route 12 shimmered with the kind of heat that made the horizon look like a living thing. Cicadas screamed from the live oak trees lining the parking lot of the Dripping Springs Community Fairgrounds, and the smell of fried food and dust mixed in the air with something sweeter, funnel cake, and the faint trace of livestock from the pens behind the main stage. Cole Harrington sat in the cab of his '09 Ford F-250, engine idling, air conditioning blowing directly into his face, and stared at the fairgrounds like a man being asked to walk into a place he'd sworn never to return to. He was 52 years old. His hair had gone mostly silver in the last 3 years, not gradually the way hair is supposed to gray, but all at once, like his body had decided to mark the occasion of loss with a visible flag. His face was weathered in the way that belonged exclusively to men who had spent decades outdoors in Texas. Deep lines around the eyes, a permanent squint even in shade. Skin the color of old saddle leather. His hands, resting on the steering wheel, were the hands of a working man. Wide palms, thick knuckles, a scar along the left index finger from a Craftsman screwdriver that had slipped in 1998. He was not supposed to be here. Jimmy Caldwell had called that morning at 7:45, which was already a bad sign because Jimmy knew Cole didn't answer before 9. "Cole, I need you, brother. Dave Pritchard threw his back out loading equipment last night, and he can't walk. I've got the Henderson Charity Gala tonight, biggest event I've run in 6 years, and I've got nobody to run the board." Cole had said no. Jimmy had paused, then said the one thing he knew would work. "It's for the Children's Hospital wing. Beverly would have wanted you there." And that was that. Beverly. Her name still landed in his chest like a stone dropped into still water. The impact immediate. The ripples slow and spreading and impossible to stop. Beverly Ann Harrington, née Calloway. Born April 3, 1973. Died November 14, 2022. 59 days shy of their 26th wedding anniversary. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in June, gone by November. The kind of timeline that doesn't give a man time to prepare, to say everything, to fix the things that needed fixing. The kind of timeline that leaves a person standing at a grave in the cold November rain thinking, "I never told her enough. I never said it right. I never." He cut the engine. "All right," he said out loud, to nobody. The fairgrounds were already buzzing with activity when Cole stepped out of the truck. A canvas equipment bag slung over one shoulder. He moved through the organized chaos with the practiced ease of a man who had spent 30 years in live event production, weaving around cable runs, nodding at stagehands, reading the layout of the space in seconds. This was the one place in his life where his body still knew exactly what to do without being asked. Jimmy Caldwell appeared from behind a generator truck, a clipboard in one hand and a radio in the other, his face breaking into a grin of pure relief when he spotted Cole. "Brother," Jimmy said, grabbing Cole's free hand and pumping it. "You have no idea." "Where's the board?" Cole said. Jimmy pointed toward the main stage, a wide-covered platform that had been constructed with obvious care, draped in American flags and strings of Edison bulbs. FOH position is center field, about 120 feet out. Dave already got the mains calibrated before he went down, so you're working from a solid foundation. What's the lineup? Jimmy hesitated, which Cole noticed immediately. Couple of local acts to open, Jimmy said, studying his clipboard with slightly too much focus. Then the main event. Who's the main event? It'll be fine, Cole. You've run sound for bigger shows. Jimmy. Jimmy looked up. George Strait. Cole said nothing for a moment. A bead of sweat ran down his temple. George Strait, he repeated. His people called us 3 weeks ago. His manager said George wanted to do something quiet, no press, no circus. A real benefit show for a real community. They specifically chose Dripping Springs because of the hospital campaign. Jimmy touched Cole's arm. I wanted to tell you earlier, but I was afraid you wouldn't come. You were right, Cole said. Cole, I'm here, aren't I? He readjusted the strap on his shoulder. Show me the board. The Midas Heritage console was a good board, not the newest model, but solid and familiar, the kind of equipment that rewarded a man who knew what he was doing. Cole settled onto the operator's stool and began his methodical pre-show checks with a focus that cleared his head of everything else. This was the gift of technical work. It demanded your whole attention, left no room for ghosts. He ran the gain structure on each channel, tested the monitor sends, walked the stage himself to check mic placement and cable runs, exchanging brief, efficient words with the backline crew. He found 2 ground loops in the monitor system that nobody else had caught and fixed them without mentioning it to anyone. He checked sightlines from every corner of the audience area, estimating where delay speakers might be needed for the back sections. By 6 o'clock, he had the system dialed in better than it had been for any show in this space, probably ever. You're something else, said a voice behind him. He turned. A young woman stood a few feet away, holding a clipboard of her own, a yellow volunteer lanyard around her neck. She was maybe 24, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a faded University of Texas t-shirt. She was looking at him with an expression of genuine curiosity. Lena Worsham, she said, extending a hand. I'm coordinating volunteers tonight. I've been watching you work for the last hour. Cole shook her hand. Cole Harrington, you're good at this. I've had time to practice. He turned back to the console. She didn't leave. Did you know there are about 800 people registered tonight? We sold out in 4 hours when the word got out about who was performing. People drove from Austin, San Antonio. I even heard somebody came from Oklahoma. Good for ticket sales, Cole said, adjusting a high-frequency trim on Channel 7. My grandmother is here, Lena said. She's been listening to George Strait since she was a teenager. She cried when I told her I'd gotten her a ticket. A pause. What about you? Are you a fan? Cole's hands went still on the board. My wife was, he said. Then, can I help you with something, Ms. Worsham? She read the signal correctly. No, just thank you for being here. Jimmy told me you came through last minute. It means a lot to a lot of people. She walked away, and Cole sat alone at the board as the fairgrounds filled with the sound of people arriving. Voices and laughter and the shuffle of boots on dry grass. And he thought about Beverly standing in their kitchen in 2019, playing Troubadour on the old Bluetooth speaker while she made her cornbread, swaying slightly, eyes closed, completely content. He pressed his palm flat against the console surface and breathed. By 7:30, the fairgrounds had transformed. 800 people filled the audience area. Families with children on shoulders, older couples in lawn chairs, teenagers sitting cross-legged on blankets, men in their 60s standing with arms folded, trying to look casual about being somewhere they clearly wanted to be for a long time. The smell of barbecue from the food vendors drifted across the field, and the Texas sky overhead had turned the deep, vivid orange and purple that only happens in the hill country in August, when the heat finally breaks its grip just enough to let the lights show off. 2 local acts opened the show. A teenage girl from Wimberley sang original songs with a clear, unaffected voice that got a warm response. Then, a 4-piece band from Austin played 30 minutes of solid Texas honky-tonk that got people on their feet. Cole ran their sound with quiet precision, making adjustments in real time that the musicians would never consciously notice, but would feel. The way the vocals suddenly sat exactly right in the mix. The way the guitar stopped fighting the kick drum and started supporting it. Between sets, Jimmy appeared at the FOH position. "George's crew is happy with your line checks," he said. His monitor engineer specifically asked who was on FOH and said to tell you you're running a clean house. Cole nodded. "His set list is in the folder on the left side of the console," Jimmy continued. 16 songs, mostly classics. His guys said he might go off-list, which, "I can handle off-list," Cole said. Jimmy put a hand on his shoulder briefly. "I know you can." He started to leave, then stopped. "Cole, Beverly would be proud of you tonight." Cole stared at the stage. "Go check your volunteers, Jimmy," he said quietly. George Strait walked on stage at 8:45 to a sound that Cole had heard described in articles and interviews, but had never quite believed until that moment. A roar from 800 people that was less a sound and more a physical sensation. Something that moved through the chest and the throat and the back of the eyes all at once. People who had been sitting were standing. People who had been standing were pressing forward. A woman 3 rows from the front covered her mouth with both hands. Cole brought the house mains up clean and smooth as the band kicked into the opening bars of Amarillo by Morning. And the voice? That voice. The one that had been playing in kitchens and trucks and dance halls across Texas for 40 years, came through the PA with a warmth and presence that made Cole close his eyes for just a second. "Beverly," he thought, "you should be here." He opened his eyes and went back to work. Song after song, Cole ran the show with the discipline of a surgeon, precise, focused, invisible. This was what he had always loved about sound engineering. Done right, nobody knew you were there. The music just was. It existed perfectly in the air, and people received it and were moved by it. And somewhere behind them a man at a console was the reason, and nobody saw him, and that was exactly right. He was deep in the 11th song when Lena Worsham appeared at his side again. And this time her expression was different. Something between urgent and uncertain. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, leaning close so he could hear her over the music. "There's a situation I thought you should know about." He kept his eyes on the board. "What kind of situation?" "There's a little girl," Lena said. "She's 9 years old. Her name is Gracie Fowler. She's here with her grandfather. Her parents couldn't come. Her mom is in the hospital." A pause. "She's been standing at the barrier the whole show with a handwritten sign asking George to play a specific song." Cole adjusted a vocal send without looking up. "That's for George's people to handle." "I know, but the sign she's holding." Lena hesitated. "It says, 'Please play You Look So Good in Love' for my mom. She's sick and she loves this song." "And Cole?" She stopped. He turned to look at her. "She looks so small standing there," Lena said simply. Cole looked back at the stage. George Strait was moving through the set with the effortless authority of a man who had been doing this for 5 decades, connecting with the audience in that rare way that made every person in the field feel like the show was somehow personally for them. "Talk to his road manager," Cole said. "Tommy Gilmore, tall guy, black jacket, standing stage left. Tell him exactly what you told me." Lena nodded and moved away quickly. Cole returned to the board, but his hands weren't as steady as they'd been an hour ago. "You Look So Good in Love." He and Beverly had danced to that song at their wedding reception in June of 1997 in the backyard of her parents' house in Kerrville, under strings of lights that her mother had spent 2 days hanging from the oak trees. Beverly in a white dress that was too simple and too perfect, laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear, her hands on his shoulders, her face tipped up toward his with an expression he had spent 26 years trying to be worthy of. He gripped the edge of the console. On stage, George Strait finished his song and paused for a long moment, looking out at the audience. Then he turned and said something quietly to his guitarist. The guitarist nodded. Cole watched. George Strait leaned into the microphone and said, in a voice that carried easily through the PA and across the field, "I just got a message from one of your volunteers tonight about a little girl standing at the front with a sign. Now, I have a set list." A ripple of knowing laughter from the crowd. "But I've always believed the best nights are the ones where you throw the list away." The crowd responded with a surge of applause. "This is for Gracie," George Strait said, "and for Gracie's mama." The opening notes of "You Look So Good in Love" came through the monitors and into Cole's headphones, and he brought the mix-up exactly right. And he sat very still at the board. And the song filled the Texas night, and 800 people swayed together in the dark. And Cole Harrington, for the first time in 3 years, wept. Not loudly. Not in a way anyone around him would see. His jaw was set, and his hands were on the faders, and his eyes were open and fixed on the stage. But tears ran down his face in the dark behind the console, and he let them, because there was nobody watching, and because the song was asking something of him that he had refused to give for 3 long years, and he was too tired suddenly to refuse anymore. After the song, a boy about 28 years old appeared in Cole's peripheral vision. Cole knew the shape of that silhouette. He had watched it grow from nothing. Danny Harrington stood 10 feet away at the edge of the FOH area, hands in his jeans pockets, watching his father. Cole wiped his face once with the back of his hand and did not turn around. The show went on. Danny Harrington had not planned to be in Dripping Springs that night. He had driven down from Austin on what he told himself was a practical errand. He needed to pick up some equipment from his uncle's property outside town. A piece of welding gear that had been sitting in a barn since his mother's estate was settled. It was practical. It was efficient. It had nothing to do with the fact that Patty Lou Graves had texted him at noon to say, "Your dad is running sound at the Henderson Gala tonight. He's going to be at the fairgrounds. Just thought you should know, sweetheart." Patty Lou had a talent for information delivered with surgical precision. Danny was 28. He had his mother's eyes, dark brown, warm by default, but capable of a stillness that read as cold to people who didn't know the difference. He had his father's build, wide through the shoulder, solid, the kind of physical presence that took up space without meaning to. He worked as a structural engineer for a firm in Austin, a career that Beverly had bragged about to every person she'd ever met, and that Cole had acknowledged with a single nod at graduation, which was the kind of arithmetic that Danny had been doing for 28 years. He told himself he wouldn't stop at the fairgrounds. He stopped at the fairgrounds. He paid the $20 gate donation. It was a benefit show, after all, and drifted toward the sound of music, and eventually found himself standing at the edge of the FOH position watching his father work. He had not spoken to Cole in 7 months. The last conversation had been at Thanksgiving, at Patty Lou's house, which had been awkward in the specific way that only family situations engineered by well-meaning friends can be. Cole had been quiet and remote in the way Danny had come to think of as his father's default setting since the funeral. Danny had tried, he genuinely had tried, to talk about something, anything, to break through the glass wall that Cole seemed to have constructed around himself. He'd mentioned a project at work. He'd asked about the house. He'd even, in a moment of desperation, asked Cole if he was eating properly, which had produced from his father a look of such withering neutrality that Danny had abandoned the effort entirely. They had driven home separately and not spoken since, Now, Danny stood in the warm Texas night watching his father run a 16-channel show for George Strait, with the quiet mastery of a man completely at home in his work, and felt the familiar tangle of emotions that his father always produced in him. Admiration mixed with resentment, love stretched thin by distance, a child's longing wearing an adult's disguise. Then the song changed. Danny recognized "You Look So Good in Love" in the first two bars, and the recognition hit him physically. A constriction in his chest, a sudden fullness behind his eyes. His mother, her kitchen, her dancing. He looked at his father. Cole's profile was illuminated faintly by the blue light of the console meters, and Danny watched with a shock that felt like cold water, as tears moved down his father's face. In 28 years, Danny Harrington had seen his father cry exactly once. At the graveside, briefly, controlled almost immediately, a single surrender to grief that Cole seemed to regret the moment it happened. That was it. Not at the diagnosis. Not during the treatment. Not at the viewing. Once at the grave. He was crying now. Danny stood very still. He didn't approach. He didn't know how. That was the truth of it. The thing he could never explain properly to the therapist he'd seen for 6 months after his mother died. The thing that came out distorted and incomplete, no matter how many times he tried to articulate it. He didn't know how to reach his father because he had never been shown how. Cole Harrington communicated through action and presence. He showed up, he fixed things, he worked, and the interior life, the emotional interior, was a room Danny had never been given a key to. He watched his father wipe his face with the back of his hand and return to the board and sit perfectly straight and not look around to see if anyone had witnessed. Danny turned and walked away before the song ended. He sat in his truck in the parking lot for 40 minutes. He didn't start the engine. He rolled down the windows and listened to the muffled music from the fairgrounds and thought about his mother with a clarity and completeness that sometimes still surprised him. 3.5 years later, he thought about her laugh, which had been loud and unself-conscious, and which she had deployed without any concern for whether the moment was dignified enough to warrant it. He thought about the way she had always taken Cole's hand in public, not ostentatiously, just naturally, the way a person reaches for something that belongs to them. He thought about the argument he'd had with Cole 6 weeks after the funeral. It had been about the house. Cole had mentioned, briefly and apparently without emotional weight, that he was thinking about selling the house in Kerrville, the house Danny had grown up in, the house his mother had planted 2 pecan trees in the front yard of, which still produced every October. Danny had responded badly. He knew that now, in retrospect, knew that his reaction had been disproportionate and fueled by grief wearing the costume of practical objection. He had accused Cole of wanting to erase Beverly, of moving on too fast, of caring more about not being reminded of her than about preserving what she'd built. Cole had said nothing for a long moment, and then said, very quietly, "I'm not going to sell the house, Danny. I was thinking out loud." And then he had left the room. And that had been, in its way, the last real conversation they had managed. The house was still in Kerrville. Cole still lived there. The pecan trees still produced every October. And as far as Danny knew, his father spent those Octobers alone. He pulled out his phone and opened a text thread with Patty Lou Graves, scrolled up to her message from noon, and typed, "He was there. He was running the sound. I saw him." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then, "And?" Danny typed, "He was crying during 'You Look So Good in Love.'" A longer pause. Then, "Baby, go talk to your daddy." Danny stared at the message. He put the phone in the cup holder and stared through the windshield at the glow of the fairground lights above the tree line. Then he got out of the truck. Patty Lou Graves was 61 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and had been Beverly Harrington's best friend since the 7th grade at Kerrville Middle School. She had attended Beverly's wedding as maid of honor, been present at Danny's birth, cried at Beverly's funeral in the front row sitting next to Cole, and had spent the subsequent 3 years functioning as the unofficial liaison between two stubborn Harrington men who loved each other in the way that men who have never learned to say it love each other. Obliquely, through action, and with a great deal of mutual injury in the spaces between. She had driven the 40 minutes from Kerrville to Dripping Springs that evening, not because she had a ticket to the show. She hadn't been able to get one, but because Jimmy Caldwell had called her and told her Cole was going to be there. And Patty Lou had developed over 3 years a policy of quietly placing herself in Cole Harrington's geographic vicinity whenever she sensed a significant emotional event was imminent. She was standing near the food vendors, nursing a sweet tea, when Danny found her. He was 28 years old and 6 feet 1, and could still, in certain lights, make her catch her breath with how much he looked like Beverly. The eyes, especially. But his expression when he found her was pure Cole. Controlled, interior. Processing something he hadn't yet found language for. "You drove down here just in case," he said. "I drove down here because Jimmy makes good pulled pork," she said. "Sit down, Danny." They found 2 empty chairs at a picnic table at the edge of the food area. The music from the fairgrounds drifted over them, distant and warm. "Tell me what you saw," Patty Lou said. He told her. She listened without interrupting, which was a discipline she had developed specifically for conversations with Harrington men, who had a tendency to stop talking if they sensed judgment arriving too early. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Your daddy has been carrying that grief like it's something he owes," she said. "Like, if he lets it down, he's failing her somehow, or failing himself. He's been that way his whole life. He holds things until they're so heavy he can't pretend anymore." "He's not the only one who lost her," Danny said. The words came out with more edge than he intended. "No," Patty Lou agreed simply. "He's not. He never—" Danny stopped, reorganized. After the funeral, he went back to work in a week. "A week, Patty Lou? I was falling apart, and he went back to work like it was. Like we had something to push through to. That's how he survives," she said. "It doesn't help anybody else survive." "No," she said again. "It doesn't." The music shifted. A slow song, something Danny didn't immediately recognize. A couple near them stood up and began to dance in the grass. Unself-consciously, the woman's head on the man's shoulder. "He's going to pack up that console tonight," Danny said, "and drive back to Kerrville and sit in that house alone. And this is going to be one more night that doesn't change anything." Patty Lou put her hand over his. "Not unless someone changes it," she said. The show ended at 11. The crowd filed out slowly, the way audiences always do after a good show. Reluctantly, still vibrating, not quite ready to give the night back to ordinary life. Cole began his teardown with methodical efficiency, disconnecting cables, coiling them in even loops, packing the equipment he'd brought with the same precision he'd used, setting it up. He was almost done when he became aware of a presence behind him. He turned. Danny stood 10 feet away. In the dim light of the fairground after the stage had gone dark, he looked younger than 28 and older than 28 simultaneously. The paradox of grief, which ages people in some ways and preserves them in others. "Hey, Dad," he said. Cole looked at him for a moment. "Hey, son," he said. The distance between them, 10 feet of trampled grass, seemed to Cole like something he'd been standing on the wrong side of for 3 years. He looked at his son's face and saw Beverly's eyes and felt the old familiar compression in his chest. "Good show?" Danny asked. "Good show," Cole said. A silence settled between them. Not comfortable, not unbearable. Familiar, in the way that shared silences between people who have a history together are always familiar, even when they're painful. "I saw you," Danny said quietly. "During the song." Cole held his son's gaze. He didn't say anything. "I don't know why I never—" Danny stopped, pressed his lips together, started again. "I don't know why we never talked about her. Not really. Not about how much we—" "Danny, I'm trying to say something, Dad." "I know you are." "Then let me." Cole set down the cable he was coiling. He straightened up, and he looked at his son, and he waited. "I miss her," Danny said. "And I'm angry. I'm angry that she's gone, and I'm angry that I didn't have more time, and I'm angry that—" His voice fractured slightly. He recovered it. "I'm angry that you and I have spent 3 years not knowing how to be in the same room together, when she's the one person who always knew how to put us back together." Cole said nothing for a long time. The fairground sounds had quieted around them. Distant voices, a vehicle pulling out of the parking lot, the cooling tick of stage equipment. The sky above them was full of stars, the way it gets in hill country in August when the moon is down. A density of light that people who grew up with it stopped seeing after a while and only recovered the sight of in certain emotional moments. "I know," Cole said finally. His voice was rough in a way that had nothing to do with age. "I know, son. It was not enough. It was nowhere near enough." But it was the first honest thing Cole Harrington had said to his son in 3 years, and both of them knew it. They stood in the dark field under the stars, not touching, not quite comfortable, not ready for the conversation that was coming, but standing, at last, on the same side of the distance. 3 days later, Cole drove to Austin. This was not a small thing. In 3 years, Cole had left Kerrville fewer times than he could count on one hand, and never to visit his son. Danny had always come to him. On holidays, when Patty Lou engineered it. On the handful of occasions when something practical required it. Cole staying in Kerrville was the kind of habit that had hardened over time from preference into architecture. The town was where Beverly was, where the house was, where the specific geography of their shared life had happened, and leaving it felt like a betrayal he couldn't articulate. But something had shifted at the fairground 3 nights ago. Not resolved, not healed. Something more preliminary than either of those things. A shift in his internal posture. A loosening of the particular rigidity with which he'd been holding himself since November of 2022. Like a fist slowly, partially, opening. He drove the 90 minutes to Austin in early morning, before the heat became serious. The hill country giving way gradually to the expanding edge of the city. Cedar and live oak thinning out. Traffic thickening. The familiar approach of a place he'd driven to hundreds of times when Beverly was alive and Danny was growing up, and the world had a different shape. Danny lived in a second-floor apartment in East Austin, in a neighborhood that had been blue-collar when Cole was young and was now expensive and self-conscious about it. Full of renovated bungalows and coffee shops and people on electric scooters. The building was a clean, newer construction that told you everything about what a structural engineer's salary could provide in the current market, which was something Beverly would have mentioned with undisguised pride. Cole sat in the parking lot for a few minutes. Then he went up and knocked. Danny answered the door in work clothes. He'd been doing something at his desk before 7 a.m., which was another thing he'd gotten from Beverly, and the surprise on his face was genuine, unguarded in a way that Cole registered as an accusation he had no defense against. "Dad," Danny said. "I should have been driving this direction for 3 years," Cole said. "Can I come in?" The apartment was orderly and impersonal in the way of spaces that haven't yet been inhabited long enough to accumulate character. furniture that was chosen for function, walls that needed pictures, a kitchen that looked used but not loved. Cole noticed these things the way a man notices symptoms, not alarmingly, but with attention. He noticed also, on the bookshelf near the window, a framed photograph of Beverly and Danny at his college graduation. Beverly's arm around her son's shoulders, her face full of the particular light she had when she was with Danny. A brightness that Cole had always been grateful for, even when he wasn't sure how to replicate it himself. He sat at Danny's kitchen table and accepted the coffee his son offered without the usual ritual of declining first, which was its own small signal. They talked. Not easily. Not fluidly. It was nothing like the conversations Beverly had always been able to initiate and sustain with both of them simultaneously. The way a bridge spans water that the two banks on either side couldn't reach. This was more like two men learning a language they'd both been too busy to study, making slow and imperfect progress through grammar they didn't fully understand. Danny talked about work, a bridge project in South Austin that was more complicated than the original specs had accounted for. A situation Cole understood in the way he understood all problems of structural integrity. He talked about Austin, about the city's pace, about feeling sometimes like he'd built a life that was well-constructed and empty at the center. Cole listened. This was not a skill that had ever come naturally to him, but Beverly had spent 26 years modeling it. And some things stick even when you're not paying attention. "I've been thinking about something," Danny said eventually. Cole waited. "Mom's box." Danny wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. "There's a box in your house, in her closet. Her things, her jewelry, her letters, the stuff from her nightstand. You never... I don't think you've opened it." Cole was quiet. "Patty Lou told me," Danny said, "that you packed everything into the box the week after the funeral and put it in the closet and never went back in." "Patty Lou talks too much," Cole said. "She loves you," Danny said. "And she's right." He looked at his father steadily. "I haven't been able to ask you for this before, but I'm asking now. Can we open the box, Dad? Together?" Cole looked at the photograph on the bookshelf. Beverly at Danny's graduation, arm around her son, full of light. "Yeah," he said, his voice low and rough. "I think we need to." The drive back to Kerrville felt different with Danny in the passenger seat. Cole couldn't have precisely defined the difference. The road was the same, the truck was the same, the hill country rolling past in its summer colors. But the interior quality of the space was changed by the presence of his son, by the awareness that he was not driving alone toward an empty house, but driving toward something that needed doing with the one other person in the world for whom it mattered the same way. They didn't talk much on the drive. That was all right. The silence between them had changed in character. It was still incomplete, still carrying the weight of 3 years' worth of unspoken things, but it had become, tentatively, the silence of two people who had agreed to attempt something together, rather than the silence of two people avoiding each other in the same direction. The house in Kerrville was a low stone ranch on 3 acres outside town, surrounded by cedar and mesquite, with Beverly's pecan trees in the front and her garden beds along the south side of the house. Overgrown now, untended for 3 seasons, the perennials having done their best to maintain themselves without help. Cole parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house. He'd bought it with Beverly in 2001, the year Danny turned 4, when the business was doing well enough to justify a mortgage they'd been nervous about for the first 2 years. Beverly had painted the front door red. She had said it was to make the house easy to find, which was not true because nothing else in the county had a red door, and you could spot it from a quarter-mile down the road. But she'd liked how it looked, and that was reason enough. The door was still red. "You kept it," Danny said quietly. "I kept it," Cole said. They went inside. The house smelled like itself. cedar and old wood, and a faint ghost of the vanilla candles Beverly had burned. Cole had not changed anything in 3 years, in the way that a person who is afraid to disturb something doesn't change things. The furniture was where it had been. The framed photos were on the walls they'd always been on. The kitchen had the same dish towels in the same drawer. It was a house in stasis. A house waiting. Danny walked through it slowly, touching things carefully. The back of a chair, the edge of a counter, a small pottery bowl on the windowsill that Beverly had made at a class she'd taken one winter in her late 40s, laughing at herself the entire time and presenting the lopsided result with enormous satisfaction. Cole watched his son move through the space and felt something in his chest that he didn't have an immediate name for. Something between grief and gratitude, between loss and presence. Her closet? Danny said. Cole led him down the hallway. Beverly's closet was on the left side of the master bedroom. A modest space, organized with the systematic neatness that had been one of her defining characteristics. Clothes still hanging in their original arrangement because Cole had not opened this door in 3 years except to place the box inside. He opened it now, and the smell that came out was her. Specific and immediate and utterly devastating. The particular combination of her perfume and her fabric softener and something undefinable that belonged only to her. Both men were still for a moment. The box was on the shelf above the hanging clothes. Cole lifted it down. It was a shoebox that Danny recognized, red and white, from a pair of boots Beverly had ordered online and been unreasonably delighted by. They carried it to the kitchen table. It sat between them for a moment before Danny lifted the lid. Inside, her reading glasses folded, a string of pearls from her mother, 3 birthday cards in Danny's childhood handwriting, a photograph Cole had not seen before, Beverly and Patty Lou at what appeared to be a diner. Young, perhaps 30, laughing at something off-camera with complete abandon. A small leather journal with a silver clasp. Her wedding band, which Cole had placed in the box at the hospital because he hadn't known what else to do with it, and had not been able to look at it since. Danny picked up the journal. "Did you know she kept one?" he asked. "No," Cole said. Danny looked at his father. "Should we?" "She'd want you to read it," Cole said. He was certain of this, the way he was certain of very few things. "She'd want both of us to." Danny opened the journal to the first page. Beverly's handwriting was round and decisive, the handwriting of a woman who had opinions about how letters should look. The first entry was dated March 12, 2022, 4 months before her diagnosis. "I've been thinking about the men in my life," she'd written. "My 2 favorite ones. They are so much alike and so completely unable to see it, which would be funny if it weren't so expensive for everybody involved. I keep thinking about what I would want them to know if something happened to me. The list is long, but the important part is short. You are each other's people. You just forgot." Danny's voice, reading aloud, broke on the last sentence. Cole reached across the table and put his hand over his son's. They stayed like that for a long time. Later, after they had read the journal together, slowly, over 2 hours and 3 cups of coffee, and the kind of silence that is the opposite of emptiness, Danny called Patty Lou. "We opened the box," he said. On the other end of the line, Patty Lou Graves said nothing for a moment. Then, "How are you 2 doing?" Danny looked at his father, who was sitting across the kitchen table with Beverly's wedding band in his palm, looking at it with an expression that was not quite peace, but was perhaps the frontier of it. "We're okay," Danny said. "We're going to be okay." A week after Danny's visit to Kerrville, Patty Lou Graves organized what she called a dinner, and what was, in reality, a carefully constructed social intervention disguised as pot roast. The guest list was small: Cole, Danny, Patty Lou herself, Jimmy Caldwell and his wife Donna Caldwell, And, because Patty Lou had a gift for complication and a complete absence of apology for it, Alan Jackson, who happened to be passing through the area following a private appearance in the Hill Country and who had been a peripheral figure in the charity gala's backstage arrangements, and who was, coincidentally, someone Beverly had loved as dearly as she'd loved George Strait. Cole arrived at Patty Lou's house on the edge of Kerrville at 6 in the evening to find Jimmy's truck already in the driveway and the sound of voices and laughter coming from inside, which produced in him the same mild defensive response that all social gatherings had produced since Beverly's death. A brief impulse to turn the truck around, countered by the knowledge that Patty Lou would appear on his doorstep the next morning and he'd have to explain himself. He went in. The house was warm and smelled of pot roast and something sweet baking, and Patty Lou met him at the door with a hug that was slightly longer than a greeting hug and slightly shorter than a therapeutic one. Patty Lou's specialty. "Danny's in the back," she said. "Alan's in the living room looking at my record collection and trying to be inconspicuous, which is difficult when you're Alan Jackson." Cole stopped. "You didn't mention—" "I mentioned pot roast," she said pleasantly. "Come in, Cole." Alan Jackson was, in person, precisely what you expected from the version of him you knew from albums and TV. Unhurried, easy, a man completely comfortable in his own size. He was sitting in the armchair near Patty Lou's record shelf, turning a vinyl copy of Don't Rock the Jukebox in his hands, with the expression of a person who finds the physical object of music genuinely interesting. He looked up when Cole came in and extended his hand. "Alan Jackson," he said. "Cole Harrington," Cole said, shaking it. "I ran sound at the gala last week. I heard. George's monitor engineer said the house mix was the best he'd heard in a small outdoor setting in years. He said it simply, without performance. It was a good console and a good system," Cole said. "Half the work was done before I sat down." Jackson looked at him with the mild attention of a man who has met 1,000 people who deflect compliments and who finds them interesting for it. "You from around here originally?" "Born in Comfort. Moved to Kerrville in 2001. "Good country," Jackson said. "Yes, sir," Cole said. "It is." Dinner was loud in the way of Patty Lou's dinners. She believed in conversations that crossed each other, in laughter that interrupted sentences, in the idea that a good table was one where nobody could quite hear everything and had to lean in. Cole sat between Danny and Jimmy Caldwell and found that the noise was easier to exist inside than silence, that something about the warmth and disorder of other people's company was doing something to the tight, controlled thing he carried in his chest. Danny was different here than he was in the careful one-on-one of their recent conversations. With Jimmy and Donna around him, with Patty Lou moving in and out of the kitchen, he was looser, laughing more easily, telling a story about a structural problem at work that involved a contractor, a miscommunication about load-bearing calculations, and a very expensive Tuesday that had the whole table going. Cole watched his son and thought, "Beverly, you should see him." After dinner, Alan Jackson asked Patty Lou if she had a guitar in the house, which she did. A battered Takamine that had belonged to her late husband, kept in the corner of the living room because she couldn't bring herself to move it. Jackson tuned it by ear in about 45 seconds and then didn't immediately play, just held it in his lap and asked Patty Lou what kind of music she kept on in the house. "Country," she said. "Real country. Old country. The kind with stories in it." "What kind of stories?" "The kind about people who aren't perfect trying to do right by each other," she said. Jackson played a quiet chord. "That's all country, really," he said. Cole was sitting in the corner of the room near the window, a glass of iced tea in his hand, watching. Danny was on the couch across from him, and their eyes met briefly. A small acknowledgement, private. The kind of communication that exists between people who have recently learned to read each other again. Jackson began to play softly. Not any particular song, just a chord progression that wandered and settled and wandered again. The kind of playing that was thinking out loud rather than performing. And he talked while he played, which was not what Cole expected. He talked about the road, about small towns, about the particular quality of an audience in a place where people's lives were the material the music was made of. "I played a show once," Jackson said. "Small place, maybe 300 people. Man in the front row cried through the whole set. Every song. Didn't bother me. I'd rather see that than someone checking their phone." A pause, a chord change. After the show, he came backstage and said his wife had died 6 months earlier. And every song I sang that night was a song she'd liked. Said it was the first time he'd felt close to her in half a year. Jackson looked at the guitar. I didn't know what to say to him. I still don't know what you say to that. The room was quiet. Cole set down his iced tea. "You don't have to say anything," he said. His voice was steady, deliberate. "You just have to show up." Jackson looked at him. "That's right," he said. Danny was looking at his father with an expression that Cole couldn't quite decode, and then could. It was the expression of a person watching someone return from a long distance away. Later, after Jackson had left, and Jimmy and Donna had followed, after Patty Lou had washed the dishes with the radio on and then disappeared diplomatically into her bedroom, Cole and Danny sat on the front porch in the dark. The hill country night had finally released the day's heat, and the air was moving, and the stars were the same stars they'd been a week ago at the fairground, the same density and depth. "I want to ask you something," Danny said. Cole waited. "Why did you stop playing?" He paused. "You had that guitar for years. Mom always said you played when you were younger. What happened to it?" Cole looked out into the dark. He hadn't thought about the guitar He tried to calculate and couldn't, which was its own answer. "It's in the house," he said. "In the hall closet. Do you still play?" "No." "Why not?" Cole thought about this honestly, in the way he was trying to think about things honestly now. Not the first answer, which was the defensive one, but the actual answer. "Beverly used to ask me to play," he said slowly. "On evenings. She'd ask, and sometimes I would, and sometimes I'd say I was tired or busy, and she'd say, 'Okay,' and..." He stopped. "After she got sick, I thought I'd play for her. I thought I had time. I was going to. There were things I was going to do that I thought I had time for." His jaw tightened. "I didn't play for her." Danny was quiet. "That's why," Cole said. "That's why I stopped." The silence between them after this was different from other silences they'd shared. It had weight and clarity to it. The quality of a thing that has been carried for a long time and has finally been set down in a place where it can be looked at properly. "Dad," Danny said. "She knew." Cole didn't answer. "She knew you loved her," Danny said. "She didn't need the song. She had you for 26 years. She knew." Cole looked at the dark yard, at the shapes of Beverly's pecan trees against the sky. His throat was working. "I know that," he said. "I know she knew. That's not..." He exhaled. "That's not really what it's about." "Then what is it about?" Cole thought about it for a long time, long enough that the night sounds filled the space between them. Crickets, a distant coyote, the whisper of wind in the cedars. "It's about the fact that I had something to give," he finally said, "and I was too stubborn and too private and too wrapped up in whatever I was wrapped up in to give it. And now, the person I would have given it to is gone." He looked at his son. "And I'm left holding something I should have handed over a long time ago." Danny's face was still, attentive. "I think maybe that's not just about the guitar," Cole said. "No," Danny said. "I don't think it is either." Another long silence. "I'm still here," Danny said. "In case that's worth anything." Cole looked at his son, Beverly's eyes in a Harrington face, 28 years old, offering something, waiting. "It's worth everything," Cole said. But the conversation that night, despite its depth, did not resolve everything, which was appropriate, because real things don't resolve in single conversations. 2 days later, Cole received a phone call from a number he didn't recognize. The man on the other end identified himself as Roger Whitfield, the event director for the Henderson Children's Hospital Foundation. He was calling to follow up on the gala, to thank Cole for his last-minute contribution. "Actually," Whitfield said, "I'm calling about something else, too. We're putting together a short documentary about the gala, specifically about the moment with the little girl and George Strait. It's going to be used for the hospital's fundraising campaign. One of our volunteers, a young woman named Lena Worsham, mentioned you by name, said she thought the night meant something particular to you." Cole was quiet. "We're not asking for much," Whitfield said. "Just a few minutes on camera. You don't have to say anything personal. Just talk about the show, about the music, the human element." Cole started to say no. Then he thought about what he'd said on Patty Lou's porch. "I had something to give, and I was too stubborn to give it." "I'll think about it," he said. "Give me a couple of days." He called Danny that evening. "There's a camera crew," he said, "for the hospital documentary. They want me to talk about the gala." "Are you going to do it?" Danny asked. "I don't know," Cole said. "I'm not good at... I don't do that kind of thing." "What kind of thing?" "Saying things, in front of people." A pause. Then Danny said, with a gentleness that reminded Cole powerfully of Beverly, "Dad, you just spent 2 nights saying more than you've said in 3 years. You can do this." Cole was silent. "And," Danny said, "Mom would have loved that you were part of something that helped kids. You know that." Cole sat with that for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, she would have." He called Roger Whitfield back the next morning and said he'd do it. The filming took place on a Thursday, back at the Dripping Springs Fairgrounds, in the late afternoon when the light was the golden, specific quality that cinematographers call magic hour, and that Cole had always just called Texas afternoon. A small crew, 3 people, unpretentious, professional, had set up near the FOH position where Cole had operated the board during the gala. They'd brought a single camera, a pair of small LED panels for fill light, and a lapel microphone that the sound person clipped to Cole's shirt collar with practiced efficiency. Cole had dressed the way he dressed for work. Clean jeans, a worn but pressed button-down, boots that had been resoled twice. Danny had driven up from Austin to be there, not to be on camera, just to be present, and was standing 20 yards away with a cup of coffee and an expression of quiet support. Lena Worsham was there too, which surprised Cole. She was sitting in a camp chair near the camera crew, and when she saw him arrive, she stood up and waved in the uncomplicated way of a person who is genuinely glad to see someone. "You came," she said. "You told them I was worth finding," he said. "I owe you something." She smiled. "Just tell the truth. That's enough." The interview was conducted by the documentary's director, a woman named Claire Hennessy, early 40s, with the direct and unhurried manner of someone who had done this kind of work long enough to know that patience was the primary tool. She began with technical questions. How long had he been doing live sound? What had drawn him to it? How did he come to be at the gala? Cole answered these in the economical way of a man describing work he understood completely, and felt himself relax slightly into the familiarity of the territory. Then Claire said, "Tell me about the moment during the show, when the little girl's request was honored." Cole was quiet for a moment. The camera was running. The mic was live. The golden afternoon light was falling across the empty fairground, and Danny was 20 yards away with his coffee, watching. And Lena was in her camp chair. And none of it was Beverly, and all of it somehow contained her. "My wife loved George Strait," Cole said. "She died 3 years ago. And the song that was requested that night, 'You Look So Good in Love,' was a song from our wedding. We danced to it." He paused. "I hadn't heard it since she died. I'd been avoiding it. Avoiding a lot of things." "What was it like, hearing it there?" Claire asked. "Hard," Cole said. "And," he searched for the word, "necessary. Like something I'd been postponing that finally just happened, whether I was ready for it or not." He looked out at the empty field where 800 people had been standing a week and a half ago. "I cried," he said plainly, "behind the console in the dark. And I'm glad I did." Claire let the silence sit for a moment. "Is there something you'd want to say to Gracie?" she asked. "The little girl who made the request?" Cole thought about this. "Gracie," he said, and the name sat in his mouth with a weight he hadn't anticipated. "What you did that night, holding up that sign, asking for something for your mama, that mattered to more people than you know. You didn't know that. You were just doing what love does. You were trying to give someone something they needed." He paused. "That's the whole thing, really. That's all of it. You show up, and you try to give the people you love what they need. And sometimes you do it in time, and sometimes you don't. But you keep trying." His voice was steady. "You keep trying." When the crew cut, nobody said anything for a moment. Then Lena said quietly, "That was exactly right." Afterward, Cole and Danny walked the empty fairground together. The stage was bare, the equipment long since loaded and gone, the field still showing the marks of 800 people. Flattened grass, occasional debris, the ghost of a crowd. They walked without particular direction, just moving through the space. "You did good," Danny said. "I don't know how it'll come out," Cole said. "It'll come out fine." Danny stopped walking. "Dad, can I say something?" Cole looked at him. "I've been thinking about coming to Kerrville more," Danny said. "Not for events or holidays, just to come. On a regular basis, to help with the property, or just to be around. If that's," he hesitated, "if that's something you'd want." Cole looked at his son. He thought about Beverly's journal, about the round, decisive handwriting. "You are each other's people. You just forgot." "That's something I'd want," he said. Danny nodded. Something in his face released. Not dramatically, not in the movie way, but in the small, real way that things actually release when people finally say the true thing. They walked back to the parking lot. On the drive home to Kerrville, Cole did something he had not done since November of 2022. He turned on the radio. He'd driven in silence for 3 years. No radio, no music, nothing that might ambush him with a song that was hers. The silence had felt like protection, and had been, he now understood, a kind of imprisonment. He turned the dial to a country station out of San Antonio. A song was playing that he didn't immediately recognize. Something newer, a younger voice, but with the old structure. A story, a loss, a man accounting for what he'd left undone and what he might still do. He drove through the hill country with the windows down and the radio on and the cedar rushing past in the late afternoon gold, and he did not cry, and he did not feel nothing. He felt something that was neither grief nor its absence, but something that lived between them, something with more room in it than either. He thought about the guitar in the hall closet. He thought about evenings and what you could do with them if you were paying attention. 2 months later, Cole Harrington sat on the back porch of the house in Kerrville on an October evening, and he played the guitar. He played nothing complicated. A few chords, a simple progression, the kind of thing his fingers remembered without being asked, because the body keeps what the mind puts away. The pecan trees in the front yard had gone heavy with nuts the way they did every October. Beverly's trees doing what they'd always done, indifferent to everything that had changed around them. Danny was inside. He'd come for the weekend. No occasion, no engineering, just the presence of one Harrington in another Harrington's house, because that was what they'd decided to do now. He'd brought groceries and a six-pack of Shiner Bock, and an easy manner that had taken them both 3 years and one August night at a fairground to find their way back to. Cole played the simple progression again, and then, without quite deciding to, began to pick out the melody of You Look So Good in Love. Not perfectly, not with the fluency he might have had if he'd kept playing, but recognizably. The notes came slowly, feeling their way, his left hand finding the chord shapes with the careful attention of someone relearning a language they once spoke naturally. The screen door opened behind him. Danny stepped out onto the porch with 2 bottles of Shiner, handed one to his father without a word, and sat down in the other chair. Cole kept playing. The melody moved through the October air, imperfect and unhurried. The pecan trees standing in the last of the evening light. The hill country going quiet around them, the way it does at the end of a hot day when the temperature finally releases and the crickets start, and the sky goes from orange to rose to the deep, specific blue that precedes the stars. He played the song through once, slowly, then again. Danny sat with his beer and looked out at the yard and said nothing, which was exactly right. Cole thought about Beverly, not with the compressed, avoidant grief of 3 years of silence, but openly, with the full weight and full warmth of 26 years. The kitchen and the dancing, the red door, the lopsided pottery bowl, the round, decisive handwriting in the silver-clasped journal, the way she had always taken his hand in public as if it were the most natural thing in the world, which it was, which it had been, which it always would be, and whatever part of him kept the things that mattered. I never played for you, he thought, but I'm playing now. He finished the song. The last chord faded into the October evening. Danny said quietly, "That was beautiful, Dad." Cole set the guitar carefully across his knees. He looked out at the pecan trees, at the first stars beginning to show in the east, at the yard Beverly had planted and tended and loved. She would have liked tonight, he said. Yeah, Danny said. She would have. They sat together on the porch as the stars came out one by one over the hill country, 2 men who had found their way back to each other through grief and silence, and a song requested by a child on a warm August night. And the evening was ordinary and irreplaceable, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Somewhere in a children's hospital in the Texas Hill Country, a woman named Mrs. Fowler recovered slowly and steadily from her illness. Her daughter Gracie, age 9, would later watch a short documentary about the charity gala and see, for the first time, the faces of the people her small act of love had quietly rearranged. She would not fully understand this until she was much older, but she would remember the night her mother watched the footage and reached over and squeezed her hand and said, "That was you, baby. You did that." And Gracie would understand, in the way children understand the most important things, completely, without analysis, that love offered openly, even imperfectly, even through a handwritten sign held up in a crowd, travels further than you can see from where you're standing. It always does,